This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets, episode 213 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. You can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at Ant Rivera86. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you like to listen to the show on the audio format. But if you want to be a part of the chat and want to be a part of the conversation, you're doing that on YouTube. I think you could also do that on X as well. But YouTube is the place you want to be for all of this conversation. And you can support Subway to Shea with Super Chat, Super Sticker, Super Thanks, now available on YouTube. Big show today because our big prospect, Nolan McLean, made his debut, and I thought of no better person to bring on the show and talk about that than the one, the only Joe DeMayo, Mets prospect writer and co-host of the Mets Pod on SNY. You can follow him at PSL to Flushing. Joe, how you doing, my friend? Nope, I think you're muted.
Live. Are we live?
We
got me?
All right, we got you.
Hey,
that's the excitement, right?
We know we're live. So how's it going, Ant?
I'm doing very well. Exciting that you got to see it live in person. Nolan McLean and his debut for the New York Mets. It's been widely talked about for some time now, and he did not disappoint. 5 1/3 innings pitched, 2 hits, no runs, 4 walks, and 8 strikeouts. To me, I think the thing that impressed me the most was his poise on the mound. I mean, he looked like a guy that was unfazed. He was having a good time. He knew the spot that he was in. That double play that he turned, grabbing that ball behind the back with the bases loaded to end the inning, that was just fantastic. What impressed you the most during Nolan McLean's start?
I mean, he was as advertised, really. And I'm with you on the poise. That's probably really what I was going to go with, because it's very easy for us to just be like, you're making your major league debut, you're good enough, go pitch well. It's a lot easier said than done. But, man, just really, really impressive. The sweeper, the curveball, which is a pitch that I highlighted as something that I wanted to see him throw more. And in AAA, he threw that curveball just 9% of the time. Yesterday, he threw it 21% of the time, and he averaged over 3,200 RPM spin rate on it, which would be number 1 in all of baseball for curveballs. And the sweeper was just under 3,000 on average, and that would be 7th among all sweepers in baseball. So this is a guy with an uncanny ability to spin the baseball, and the sinker was pretty good yesterday too. So all in all, really, really excited that Nolan got this opportunity, and against a lineup with multiple all-stars in it. He didn't face the White Sox. He didn't face the Rockies. He faced a legitimate offense and shut them down for nearly 6 innings.
Yeah, that was a great to see. You got Eugenio Suarez on that team, Julio Rodriguez. I mean, it's just a team full of a really good Josh Naylor. I mean, it's a good offense to go up against and to see what you got there. What should we focus on when it comes to McLean as he starts to get more starts here down the stretch? What are things that the Mets fans should key in on when it comes to Nolan McLean?
Keep an eye on the walks. That's kind of always been a thing for him in the minor leagues, and part of that is genuinely his stuff moves too much. Like, it's not like he has control problems, like an inability to throw strikes, but sometimes his pitches move too much and end up out of the strike zone. So really just keep an eye on the walks. That's the only thing that I really have much concern about. And then slightly, though it's been a lot better lately, early in the year, because I know there's a lot of people that said the Mets should have called him up 2 months ago. He should have already been here. He was getting slaughtered by left-handed hitters at the AAA level. He kind of changed his pitch mix versus lefties at the AAA level over the last, call it, month or so, and the results have been much better. More emphasis on that sinker. You see him front door it, or you see him kind of just get away from the barrel on the outside. That curveball is huge because the sweeper, which is his primary pitch, as a right-handed pitcher, that's like one of the last pitches you want to be throwing to a left-handed hitter. It just never really works out for you. So I would say the command and how he does against left-handed hitters. Those are two things that I think have a chance to creep up on you. But otherwise, this is a guy that is big league ready. He's going to be, I think, a staple in this rotation, certainly for the rest of this year. And I think heading into next year as well.
It's going to be Jeremy Hefner and the pitching lab's job to keep the walks down. I mean, it's been a struggle for the entire Mets pitching staff to keep the walks down when it comes to any of the pitchers, whether in the bullpen or in the rotation. But I think what I liked so much with him through his journey here is he's been very consistent. I mean, a lot of the talk was Brandon Sproat at the beginning of the season. When are we going to see Brandon Sproat? Is he going to be the one to come up? And Nolan McLean kind of like jumped him with how consistent he was at AAA. I know over the last month or so in June and July that Sproat has really come into his own and really been solid. Not last start, not so much, but he's really matured. But McLean has pretty much been consistent throughout all his whole career.
For sure. I mean, a lot of times, because AAA is a totally different beast than AA. You start using a different baseball. They use the major league ball at the AAA level. They use a different baseball at AA and below. You now have the ABS challenge system, which I'm sure we'll talk about Jonah Tong at some point on this show. Mm-hmm. The ABS challenge system cost him his 10th strikeout and 6th shutout last night because the hitter challenged and ended up being a ball. So it's just, and you're facing veteran hitters. Like for the first time, you're facing major league hitters or former major league hitters that have different approaches. So AAA tends to be a much bigger challenge for pitchers than maybe it used to be. And, you know, Brandon Sproat, as an example, this is a guy that dominated single A, dominated AA, got to AAA, and it was a major struggle for him. And as you mentioned, it's been a lot better over his last, call it 8 starts or so. McLean never really hit a bump anywhere. He's just been incredibly consistent. And I think at times, this is going to sound crazy, but at times, teams want to see their prospects struggle. Like they think that's a positive because you don't really want Andy Green, who's the vice president of player development, actually told us in spring training down in Port St. Lucie when we had him on the Mets pod that the last thing we want is a young player's first struggle to be at the major league level. Well, that's where Nolan McLean's first struggle is going to be. That's just the way it worked out.
Yeah, it's good to get through a little adversity and see, and I guess that's what we're seeing with Brandon Sproat down there in AAA. And I assume at some point we'll see him, whether it's a September call up or whatever. I mean, the pitching staff has not really given us length, and they've been throwing everyone into the bullpen, whether it's Frankie Montas, Paul Blackburn, who got DFA'd the other day. So, you know, I'm assuming at some point we will see Brandon Sproat and he will get his opportunity. I want to shout out to the chat here. We got 61 people in the room right now. Maureen, Jeff Cohen, we got Duran Rivera, Brad, G Money Stacks, Nelson Cruz, Matt Ibanez from Till Mets Do Us Part in the chat.
Oh, you let him in here?
He's in the room. He specifically came in just for this episode. So if he bothers you a little bit, just let me know. I know we have a little bit of a mute button in there, just messing around with him. There was one comment that I wanted to get to, and it was from Jeff Cohen. And he goes, "Why is the Mets organization so stuck on pitch counts? Nolan looked like he could have finished the inning. As soon as Mendoza came out of the dugout, my first thought was, uh-oh." And I know Mendoza got booed, and he's like, "Yeah, you should boo me."
Yeah. Believe it or not, I fully agreed with what Carlos Mendoza did there. I know it's going to sound crazy because we want our starters going 6 innings. Look, it's not the Mets are so stuck on pitch counts. It's baseball is kind of stuck on pitch counts. The days of even me, I'm a young, strapping 37 years old, but I remember pitchers going deep in the games. It's just not a thing anymore. And here's why it actually made sense. As I pointed out just a couple minutes ago, Nolan McLean has struggled against left-handed hitters, and Josh Naylor was coming up. And Gregory Soto absolutely dominates. Like lefties cannot touch Gregory Soto. And then weirdly, Eugenio Suarez, who was on deck, has crazy reverse splits. I think going into yesterday, he's hitting 165 against lefties. Like just literally can't touch left-handed pitching for whatever reason. And McLean was at 91 pitches, which, okay, yeah, we'd like to see him get closer to 100. He has never thrown more than 96 pitches in an outing. I'm going to guess in his life, but certainly not in his collegiate or professional life. So it's going to be a buildup a little bit with McLean. I think he's going to get there. I think he's built to do it. And I know it's frustrating. And Jeff, I totally get it. I don't boo. I was at the stadium. I don't boo anyway. But when everyone booed Mendoza, I was like, I get it. Everyone's going to freak out. I got plenty of text messages about it. And I think Mendoza handled it perfectly after a game where he's just like, hey, if I was in the crowd, I would boo me too. But as the manager, he has the responsibility to do the right thing, not just the thing that's most popular.
Maureen in the chat saying our future looks bright. McLean, Sproat, Tong, Scott, and Santucci. We're going to get into Sproat. We're going to get into Tong. I know Scott is in rehab right now. I think he threw off a mound recently.
Yep. Yeah. He's throwing off a mound, coming off Tommy John. And I love Maureen's shout out of Christian Scott. He's almost a forgotten guy. Remember how excited we were last May, I think it was, when he came up against Tampa Bay. He was last year's Nolan McLean or Brandon Sproat. That's what Christian Scott was. So let's not forget that name, and totally agree with what Maureen says, that not only do we have these young pitchers coming on the way, you still have Kodai Senga under contract. You still have Sean Manaea under contract. You still have David Peterson. So the Mets rotation is getting deeper and deeper. And it's also getting to the point where you're going to have these young players being able to make a huge impact.
I want to talk about Santucci for a second, because I think it was Jeff Cohen who just asked the question before. I think it was at one of the Queens baseball convention. He's like, "Oh, you got to look out for Santucci. He's gonna be a player in the big leagues." What's your thoughts on him?
He's been really good this year. I'm going to pull up he had a great start the other day. It was his best start as a pro. He's at Double-A now. He threw 5 1/3, 3 hits, 1 run, but none were earned. 1 walk and a career high 11 strikeouts. This is a guy with a clean, smooth delivery. Fastball will get up to 97 miles an hour. Wipeout slider that's in the upper 80s. He's got to work and really figure out that third pitch. So I think there is like a semblance of reliever risk here, but this is a guy in his first pro season who is still really relatively new to just being a pitcher. He was a two-way player up until his last year of college. And so he's been just a full-time pitcher for, almost less than 2 years at this point. And he has a 2.73 ERA at Double-A. So these guys are not only performing well, they have stuff, and they're moving through the minor league system quickly. I know people are freaking out about when guys are being called up and things like that. And other than Jonah Tong just weirdly being kept in Double-A longer than I thought he should have been, the Mets have been moving these pitchers through the minor league system at a pretty aggressive rate.
Haven't we gone through the whole getting them up the system quickly enough with, Ronnie Mauricio and Brett Beatty and Mark and now we're seeing, how the struggles have been for them. I think that the way they've been handling the last couple of prospects, I think they've been doing it correctly. And let's get into those guys who got promoted. Carson Benj, Jet Williams, Jonah Tong, all going to AAA alongside as well with Ryan Clifford. I know that in the MLB pipeline rankings, you guys got different rankings. MLB pipeline ranked Carson Benj number 1, and they have Jet Williams number 2. You have it the other way. You have Jet Williams number 1. Tong is in between, and then you have Benj at number 3. Excuse me. For you, what separates Jet Williams from Carson Benj?
Yeah, I look, and I actually put, so if you check out my top 30, which is pinned to my Twitter profile, you could go on sny.tv and find it. I do a little blurb before I start ranking 30 guys. So it's a lot to read. I get it. But at the top, I make sure to make a point. To me, you could have said any of the top 3 in the system were number 1 and I wouldn't fight you. Like, I think they're neck and neck. And what separates, I think, Jet Williams from Carson Benj to me is I think Jet's just a more complete player than Benj is. Benj is without question the better pure hitter. He's got more power, but he's playing center field and it's getting better. I'm still not 100% sold that center field is going to be a plus position for him. I think he'll be able to play it. It's just a matter of at how high of a level. Jet is a better athlete, better on the base paths, has the defensive versatility. He can truly play all 3 up the middle spots. And I kind of like him best at second, but he's getting plenty of reps in center and he's comfortable out there as well. And offensively, I know that Carson Benj absolutely lit Double-A on fire, but let's not forget how good Jet was coming off kind of a lost year last year, posting, an OPS near 900 at the Double-A level. And it's just Benj came in and obliterated Double A, so that kind of overshadowed Jet a bit. But for me, that's kind of the, I guess, tiebreakers. I think Jet's just a little bit more of a complete player. But if you're talking just who's the better offensive prospect, Benj is probably the better all-around hitter.
When you look at second base and center field, we got a logjam right now at second base. Center field is probably a little bit more open going into the offseason next year with, I don't think they're going to re-sign Cedric Mullins or, what they're going to do with Tyrone Taylor is really, backup center fielder. Who is it? Who should be? You think it's Jet Williams should be at second, and that's like you said, and Carson Benj in center field. If Carson Benj is not playing center field, there's really no spot for him because you got Soto in right, you got Nimmo in left. If it's up to you, how are you playing this out?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm putting Jet at second. I'm putting Benj in center. I don't think either of them will be on the opening day roster. I'm guessing. Jeff McNeil is still here and he's having a good year. I know that it's kind of flown under the radar. Jeff McNeil's not he's not in the dump category anymore, right? Like I'm sure we've done off-season shows and things where it's just like, just trade Jeff McNeil away. I think those days maybe aren't here anymore, though. I guess the other side of the coin is maybe he's reestablishing some value and it's something you might want to consider. But I think when you think at some point in 2026, I can see both those guys at those specific positions at the major league level. And the Mets are a team that's trying to win now. And they're going to be trying to win now every year. So it's going to be maybe another short-term solution in center field. Like when they signed Harrison Bader, at the time, I looked at it as, they're just signing a guy to fill the spot until Drew Gilbert is ready. And then Gilbert was hurt and things never really necessarily panned out there. I think these guys are going to be real everyday major league players, but the Mets will probably protect themselves with veterans at those spots to start the season next year.
I know that's not to a lot of Met fans' desire to hear that.
I'm not here to make everybody smile, Ant. I'm not here to make everyone smile.
Well, they did it right with Nolan McLean so far, and let's hope that it just continues to this team build from within like they have been doing, because free agencies are getting quite expensive, I'll say.
Yeah.
We got Jonah Tong. You mentioned his last start, which was his AAA debut. 5 2/3 innings pitched, 3 hits, no runs, 2 walks, and 9 strikeouts. He said he just missed 10 strikeouts with that ABS system. What does Tong have to do to work on getting himself to Queens, and how quickly for him?
I think this is another next year thing. And I know every single time I tweet out a Jonah Tong stat line, every response is just going to be to promote him. Yeah. I do not think Jonah Tong is making his big league debut this year. If he does, I'm going to say this, and this is going to maybe come off wrong. Something really bad happened at the major league level if Jonah Tong's making his debut. The Mets don't have roster flexibility at this point, and that's maybe a reason why Brandon Sproat might not make it here until September. At this point, the Mets have I guess 2. They technically have 2 optionable players on their pitching staff. Nolan McLean, they're not optioning Nolan McLean for Brandon Sproat. And number 2, Reed Garrett. And I don't think they're optioning Reed Garrett, even though he's been inconsistent at times. I think he's staying here. I don't think the Mets are in a rush, and frankly, they shouldn't be. I know he hasn't pitched great lately. I'm not designating Ryan Stanek for assignment for him to go sign with the Phillies and go perform in the postseason like he always does. So I don't think Jonah's going to make his way to the bigs this year, but he's another 2026 guy, and that's the theme I want to set here. Is the Mets right now, they're going through what they're going through this season. It hasn't been great for a little bit now. They're still in a playoff spot, so the season's not over. But the good part here is that these guys are close. If they're not now, they're next year. So the young talent right now, the top 6 prospects in the system, according to my rankings, are all at the AAA level, and I think that's a thing to be really excited about.
Rosie K bringing up in the chat what you've talked about. Tong should not be promoted this year. Sproat should be up. He thinks Stanek and Montas have been awful and have cost the Mets games this year, which, yes, have been true. Yeah. You mentioned keeping Stanek, which I agree with. him in the postseason, he was really good like people forget how good he was helping out Edwin Diaz. Those two were really the only ones that showed up for the bullpen in the postseason. And we know that he struggled last season as well with his arrival in New York. But Montas, I don't, what do you think ends up happening with Frankie Montas this year? Because he does have another year's worth of contract, and he just has not been good at all. Even his bullpen the other day was just a rough struggle for him.
I think the plan for now is for him to try to provide length out of the bullpen if he's actually able to do that on days where the starters go short. And his first experiment out there didn't exactly go swimmingly. It's been obviously a tough go. And look, I know people have absolutely lost their mind about Frankie Montas, and I get it. It's been a bad year. He was hurt, and he has had very few good outings. I mean, when he first came back, I think he did like 5 innings in a run once or twice. So he had a couple like okay outings, but it hasn't been a good signing. And I got news for everybody, every GM and executive, because I know everyone's getting after David Stearns. Everybody makes mistake signings, and the key is that they made a mistake signing here with Montas, or at least what appears to be, on a short-term basis. So it's something they can overcome. I don't envision him getting designated for assignment this year. I think he's probably going to be a part of the bullpen into September just to give potentially some length. And this offseason, with all the pitchers the Mets have and the young guys, if he decides not to opt out, which is my guess, he's probably not going to opt out. I would expect to see the Mets try to move him and just try to eat a good amount of the contract, and somebody out there is going to be willing to take a shot on Montas for, much less than $17 million.
I think another scenario is he'll be Paul Blackburn of next year.
Yeah,
he'll probably DFA at some point next year if it doesn't work out. There is talent there in that arm. It's just, he's been through a lot of injuries, and it just hasn't worked out here so far in New York. And maybe the injuries is part of the issue that he's had. I mean, it's just been a struggle for him. Duran Rivera saying this is the most stacked farm system since Harvey, DeGrom, Matz, Conforto, and the trades for 2 prospects, which were Syndergaard and Wheeler.
Yeah, the Mets farm system is in as good a shape as it's been in some time. After the trade deadline, MLB pipeline. So this is where I will go to the national outlets when they rank farm systems and they do top 100 lists. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm just doing the Mets. And even after the deadline, where the Mets traded Drew Gilbert and Blade Tidwell and Raymond Gomez and Anthony Nunez and Wellington Aracene, all the prospects that they traded a bevy of prospects, and MLB Pipeline still ranked the Mets as the number 7 system in baseball, despite trading all of those pieces. It just shows that this organization has created such depth, and the top is really exciting with Jet Williams and Jonah Tong and Carson Benj and Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat and Ryan Clifford, and even a guy like Elian Pena down in the Dominican Summer League, who's years away but is potentially the highest upside of them all. The depth of this system is what allowed the Mets to pull off all of these trades, and that's a shout out to the scouting department, the player development department, and going to the Helsley trade. I know he hasn't been particularly good since the deadline, but just an example of like the depth of the system. Frank Elisalt was the 3rd piece of the trade to bring Ryan Helsley in. He was a 19th round pick last year out of a small college, and he had made such an impression in pro baseball in less than a calendar year that the Cardinals were like, we want that guy to close out the deal for Ryan Helsley. So that just shows in what the Mets have been able to pull together over the last 2-3 years with Chris Gross and Andy Green in this department that they have in place.
I'll talk about a name that you haven't mentioned yet, and Ibby's mentioning this on the chat. Let's talk about Jacob Reimer. He's a man on fire. I know he plays third base. We haven't had the much success at third base, I think, throughout the entire franchise. I mean, David Wright is the guy. That's why his number's retired. He's best third baseman we've had. But even recently, no one has staked claim. We thought maybe Mark Vientos was going to be the guy. He hasn't been hitting well. Brett Beatty has been on and off. Ronnie Mauricio still going through growing pains as well. What are your thoughts on Jacob Reimer, and could he be the guy in the future that stakes his claim at third base?
I need to see him grow defensively. It looked like he made a lot of strides when he was with Brooklyn defensively at third base. Ever since he's been at Binghamton, he's weirdly just making a lot of errors. And I don't like, there's throwing errors, there's fielding errors. So the defense has been a bit of an issue since he got to AA level. Maybe I don't know if it's nerves. I don't know exactly what's going on. So I'm going to keep an eye on the defensive side. But this is a guy who missed all of last year, tore his hamstring in spring training, or missed virtually all of last year. I think he came back at the real end and then went to the Arizona Fall League. He was a guy that was in the same lineup as Jet Williams and performing similarly. Obviously not the speed guy. Reimer's a big, bulky third base / first baseman, but average OPS on base, like very similar to Jet. And he was a guy I had like my eye on to rise up rankings, and then he went and missed the season, and now he came back with a vengeance. There's above average power here, really good plan at the plate, like an advanced plate discipline, makes really good swing decisions, doesn't swing and miss a ton in the zone, which is kind of like a starting point for a prospect. I kind of look at him maybe as more of like a floor player than a big ceiling player. But he is inside my top 10. So this is a guy that I think has had a really good year, and he's especially turned it on offensively at the AA level over the last few days. I know he has a walk-off home run. He hit a home run yesterday as well. So, Jacob Reimer, definitely one to keep an eye on. I would really focus on what the defense looks like at third base, though.
Another guy in your top 10, Ryan Clifford at number 6, just got called up AAA as well. With Clifford's jump to AAA, I know a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but do you think that this starts to signal the kind of end of the Pete Alonso era here in New York?
I hope not. I am at the point, and I want every prospect humanly possible to be in the Mets lineup and rotation and bullpen. That would just be music to my ears. Pete Alonso just has to stay with the Mets. That's just what has to happen. They have to find a way to make this work. I like Ryan Clifford. He's, I think, is like fifth in all of minor league baseball in home runs. So the power is real. He has the ability to draw walks. He's trimmed the strikeout rate a little bit this year, but strikeouts are always going to be a part of his game. He's a decent to solid defensive first baseman, and they'll actually throw him out in the corner outfield on occasion. And that's probably not what he's going to do at the major league level, but that just kind of shows like he's maybe a little bit better of an athlete than your average, like lumbering first baseman. Like he can go stand out in the corner outfield. I think he has a chance to hit in the middle of an order somewhere. But for me, I'm not ready to be kicking Pete Alonso out the door for someone like Ryan Clifford.
No, I totally agree. Maybe they use him as trade bait for something else at some point. I mean, if Pete Alonso stays, that's your first baseman. The only other position he plays right now is the outfield, and we already got a log jam out there. And then you mentioned Jet Williams and Carson Bench, and it's going to be tough for Ryan Clifford to crack this organization. And we're already seeing this past offseason with trying to bring back Pete. I think it's going to be even tenfold with the fans wanting him to come back. There was a talk about Mark Vientos maybe playing first, and just look at how Mark Vientos has been playing this season. It just doesn't seem like it's going to work out that way. It's got to be Pete to me.
Yeah, I can't see it unless some team comes in with some 7-year like crazy offer. If it's within the like just reasonable, the Mets need to extend maybe a little further than they would ideally want to. I mean, Pete has his faults. There's no question about it, and I think, as fans and analysts too, I think we spend a little too much time focusing on what players don't do well, and almost like pushing to the side that Alonso's like, you could rely on him for 40 and 100 every year, basically. And you can't just replace that with somebody else. It's not that simple. And can you replace it in the aggregate? I guess, sure, you can. But Pete Alonso's a Met, man. He was drafted here. He was developed here. He just set the home run record, obviously, passing Darryl Strawberry. He took on New York in the best way possible. Everything about him fits here. I don't want to see him in another uniform. So I'm with Pete the other night when he was like basically saying he wanted to be here, and he's like, hey, it's on Steve and David to figure out the business side, and
It's true.
I'm with the polar bear on that. So those guys got to find a way to make it work to keep Pete here.
Before we wrap up on the prospects here, this one thing, because there was a lot of talk about bringing up McLean, bringing up Brandon Sproat. Even if these guys come up, I think it's not fair as the Mets fan base to make these guys the saviors of this team right now. Maybe this is a turning point. Maybe McLean gives them some energy here, but to have them be kind of the saviors to lead this team to the playoffs, I just don't think it's fair. And it really isn't on this current core to step up and right this ship.
Yeah, it's not fair, but on the other side of coin, I get it. The starters aren't performing, so you need Nolan McLean to come up and perform. And whenever Brandon Sproat does come up, you need him to come up and perform. The Mets are in the midst of a playoff hunt right now, so it is. I agree with you in general. It's on the backs of Sean Manaea making $25 million a year. It's on the back of Kodai Senga on a big contract. It's on the back of David Peterson, who's been, up until his last start, incredibly consistent this year. And the young guys are supposed to supplement that core of the roster. And on the offensive side of things, they need, Lindor seems to be catching fire. Juan Soto is hitting better. Pete is hitting better. Seems like those guys are starting to hit, and now they're magically starting to score runs. Young players should always be considered supplementary pieces to the major league core of your team. And then hopefully over time, they become part of that core. And, it's on the rest of the rotation. McLean can give you 5 1/3 if Clay Holmes goes 2 2/3, Sunday night. That kind of is what it is. So you need the other guys in the rotation to step up and, can't call these young guys saviors, but when you get thrusted into the middle of a spot where the Mets are a game and a half up on the wild card, and what are they, 4.5 back of Philly? 5? I don't know, something like that.
I think they're 4 now.
Yeah. Okay. So they're 4 back of Philly. So as crazy as it sounds, and it's going to sound absolutely crazy because I know the world is falling, the Mets could still win the NL East. Forget just the wild card. These young guys got to perform, and that adds a little pressure. And good on Nolan McLean for not putting that pressure on his back for his big league debut and just going out and pitching.
There was definitely a scare the other night for the Phillies with Yohan Duran getting hit and taken out of the game. Now we have this injury to Zach Wheeler. I mean, you don't like to see it, that's for sure. Hope that he's okay, but that's a serious injury to his shoulder with the blood clot. Hopefully he comes back healthy and strong. Zach Wheeler fan here. I mean, you don't want to see anyone get hurt at all. But the Phillies that's a big blow to the Philadelphia Phillies right now.
Huge. And all the best to Zach. I mean, Zach was nothing but a good Met, and I don't think he really wanted to leave here, but it worked out the way it did. And, he's in Philly, so he happened to go to a rival, but nothing but love for Zach Wheeler. So hope all the best for him.
As we talk about fixing these Mets struggles here, the Mets have struggled all the way since the trade deadline, only 3 wins since then. Team really hasn't been in sync all season, whether it's, the hitting's been good, the pitching's been bad, vice versa, or, the rotation has been good, bullpen's not. It's just been, they have not been in sync all season long. We are seeing that, in clear display right now. Such a struggle. Pitching staff has struggled because the starting pitchers have not been giving this team length, and it's hurt the bullpen here. What is the best way to utilize these pitchers to get the most success out of them? They DFA'd Paul Blackburn, Clay Holmes. Is it possible he goes to the bullpen? What for you is the best way with this current group that we have right now? Because that's what's going to be. What's the best way to get the best out of all these guys?
Hypnotize Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga to give you 6 innings every single time they go out. I think that's the best solution. Can we do that?
Yeah.
But what it comes down to, and you're right, Ant, it all stems from the starters not giving them length. Ryan Helsley has been a struggle. They need Ryan Helsley to pitch better. Tyler Rogers, it's been some unluck, but he's given up some runs, and giving up runs is not something Tyler Rogers has done over the last 3 years. They need the guys here to just pitch better. Sometimes it is that simple, right? And you trade prospects for Ryan Helsley, an all-star closer. You don't expect him to give up 3 leads in a row. You trade some meaningful pieces for Tyler Rogers. You expect him to come in and do his thing. Gregory Soto's actually been probably the best of them
Yeah.
that the Mets have acquired. But it all stems getting these starters to throw 6 innings. That's what I want to see. Or 5 1/3, 5 2/3, kind of like what you saw from Nolan McLean yesterday. I'm not upset about that, but we need to stop with the 4 innings. We need to stop with the 4 1/3. If you do that, the more you do that, the more Carlos Mendoza could manage this thing, because there's a lot of heat thrown Mendoza's way, and I won't stand for it. I think Mendoza is a fantastic manager. I'm more than happy that he's the manager of the Mets. What exactly do people want him to do? You only have starters going 3 1/3, 4 1/3, and then the relievers, you can only use certain ones each day, because if you use this guy 2 days in a row, he's not available, or you use this guy for 2 innings, he's not available. Mendoza doesn't have a magic button to fix this, and they blew leads in 7 straight games heading into, obviously, Saturday's game. They didn't blow a lead, but before that, it was 7 straight games in which they blew a lead, and can't be doing that. Every game counts. We're 40 games, or about 40 games left in the season. Each game counts. We need these starters to pitch deeper. Senga is further removed from the injury. Minaya seems like he at least got his feet under him. It's not exactly what we want to be seeing from Sean Minaya, but his feet are back under him. Peterson has been awesome. I can't get after him for having a bad start. Everybody's allowed to have bad starts. Everybody will have them, but we want him to get back on the horse. And Clay Holmes is going to be the one to watch. And I think as we head into September, I think everyone hoping that, Clay Holmes is just moved to the bullpen are just not going to be happy I don't think that exactly is going to happen. Maybe in the postseason, it's like straight up bullpen, but I think you're going to see a piggyback situation, if I had to guess, where maybe he's paired with a McLean or paired with a Sproat in September. And that'll be kind of your way to navigate those games when you get that extra roster spot. But there's no flexibility here as far as sending guys down, as I said, maybe 10 minutes ago or so. So the roster is what it is. They got to get more length out of the starters, and they need Ryan Helsley to pitch well. They need Tyler Rogers to pitch well. And if those things happen, all of a sudden this thing starts to take shape.
I thought that David Stearns had a really good trade deadline. It's just that these guys are now pitching every day. I think we've seen Tyler Rogers and Ryan Helsley almost every game since they've gotten here, and that should not be happening. And with the rotation, if they, give you the length, I think that these guys will fill into their roles. You had Edwin Diaz had to come in for, 2-inning save, and obviously that's going to happen from time to time. But with Helsley being ineffective, Rogers having some rough starts, like you mentioned, Gregory Soto's been the best so far. Even Brooks Raley had a struggle the other night. It's going to happen, and these guys are just, they can't be overworked, and the rotation needs to step up. When it comes to Clay Holmes that you mentioned earlier, I think it's really hard to go from being a reliever to then being a starter and really maxing your innings to then having to go back to being a reliever. I mean, Paul Blackburn even mentioned it in one of his post-game press conferences. It was really hard for him to be a starter, prepare to being a reliever. It's just not easy to just say, throw him into the bullpen.
Yeah, I think we often simplify all of that, but I think Holmes's experience in the bullpen will help him as we get down to the stretch. But what it comes down to, and I don't care if people like it, Clay Holmes was signed to be a starting pitcher for the New York Mets. He was not signed to be a starting pitcher for 3 months. He was signed to be a starting pitcher going forward. So the Mets are going to continue to do this. And I think it would make sense to pair him with somebody so you can limit those innings just a little bit, because he's obviously blown past his career high. And, I think Clay Holmes is going to be a part of the 2026 rotation, right? He signed a 3-year deal. The opt-out isn't until after 2. So Holmes is going to be a part of the 2026 rotation. And I would say what we should think back to is how good Clay Holmes was for the first 2.5 months of the season, and maybe focus a little less going forward, at least, on what has happened lately, when clearly he's, I don't want to say hitting a wall, because a big thing here too is the Mets are at a point from like a sports science standpoint and their analytics, they are able to see how Clay Holmes is responding between starts. They're evaluating his stuff. It's not just it used to be like a blanket statement. Don't go more than 30 innings over your last year. And it was kind of like an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
The Mets now are operating off of science and data to determine pitch counts and inning counts and how far these guys could go. So there's education behind their decisions with Clay Holmes, and they just need him to pitch better for the rest of this season, one way or another.
I feel like Sean Manaea is one of the best examples of that. He really went over his pitch innings limit, especially when we went into the postseason. Then we finally saw him kind of get tired in that last start against the Dodgers there. But he went past his pitch inning, his innings limit. He was doing very well, and that's a great example of that whole situation. Shout out to Shea Parking Lot. He agrees with you. Mendoza is very good. He's a clubhouse glue guy. Players love him, which also brings up a point from Maureen that you had mentioned earlier about people wanting him to be fired. I'm pretty sure you've seen it a lot on X about that whole situation. If this team doesn't make the playoffs, as Maureen states, could Mendoza be gone? I'm thinking
No.
Absolutely not. But there are other coaches as well that have gotten a lot of talk and slack on here, especially when you talk about the hitting and what it has done. Eric Chavez, Jeremy Barnes. What are your thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, I think Mendoza is safe no matter what happens. And maybe we'll be able to clip this and I'll be wrong or something, but I think Mendoza is safe. As far as the other coaches, the Mets brought back the entire staff, obviously, after the 2024 success into 2025. I don't want to say so-and-so is being fired because I think that's, I don't know, feels kind of icky to do. But I won't be surprised if the coaching staff looks different in 2026 than it does in 2025. But I don't think Carlos Mendoza is going to be a part of that purge. And I surely hope it's not, because I think that would be a gargantuan mistake and an overreaction on what would be ultimately a very disappointing season. To Marine's point, like, the Mets were built to go deep into the playoffs, not miss the playoffs. But I don't think that is, cost Carlos Mendoza his job.
I'm always wondering why we have two hitting coaches, right? I don't know how many. I haven't checked in on other teams and if they have two as well. But a lot of people are frustrated the fact that we got two hitting coaches. These guys are struggling with runners in scoring position all season long, and I feel like Juan Soto is kind of also the poster child of the struggles with runners in scoring position this offseason. So what are your thoughts on that whole situation?
It's not uncommon to have a hitting coach and an assistant hitting coach. A lot of teams do that. So the Mets aren't particularly unique with that. As far as like runners in scoring position, I want to know what people think Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes are telling hitters. And they're like, just don't get hits. Like, what do we think they're doing? Approach. Okay. I understand it hasn't been great. And what it comes down to here is, when hitters are performing, it's a credit to the hitters. When they're not performing, it's the hitting coach's fault. And that's the nature of the beast. So, like, I could agree with it, not agree with it. That doesn't matter. That's basically how it works. Juan Soto struggling with runners in scoring position is definitely shocking, because he's been historically an incredibly clutch player. I don't know what's going on, and maybe there's some randomness to it a little bit as well. But as far as the hitting coaches go, it hasn't been the best year, if you're putting that on your resume, if you're Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes, as far as the Mets overall hitting. But I am generally of the belief that coaches are largely scapegoats, and it's on the players. Look, Juan Soto is getting paid the biggest contract in American sports history. Pete Alonso is getting $30 million a year. Francisco Lindor is getting $34 million a year. Brandon Nimmo is getting over $20 million a year. As much as the hitting coaches do matter, and they have to do their jobs, it's on those players that are getting paid oodles of money to perform, and they just haven't come through in those spots. Other than Alonso, he's been awesome with runners in scoring position.
Well, when they don't perform and they're struggling, they look to the kids who have gotten an ample opportunity this season, a lot of playing time. And even Rosie K saying, Vientos seems to be coming out of his slump, but he's not getting enough playing time. How do you get more consistency from Vientos, Beatty, and Mauricio? And on top of that, who should be getting the most starts in your eyes at this moment in time moving forward?
I genuinely think you just have to ride the streaks of these guys. It's a little peculiar. Vientos was starting to swing the bat better, and they didn't play for almost a week. Mauricio, very up and down, but his ups are holy crap. Like, it is holy crap stuff. Beatty's actually been a little more consistent. I know he certainly had his downtime where he got sent back to AAA, but since he came back up, he's been largely a lot more of a consistent player. So right now I'm looking for, I guess, any semblance of consistency, which I think helps Beatty being in the lineup more often than the others. But ultimately, when it comes to young players, more often than not, these guys are going to come up and have a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And that's really tough to invigorate into your lineup when you're trying to make the playoffs and trying to make the World Series, to deal with the ups and downs. So I would do my best to just ride the streaks. So if Mauricio's hitting, throw him out there until he stops hitting. If Vientos is hitting, throw him out there until he stops hitting. And Beatty, similar type of thing, but I think he's been at least a little bit more consistent than the others this year.
As we wrap up the show, I want to talk about Pete a little bit here, breaking the home run record, all-time New York Met, 2 home runs on Tuesday, overtaking Darryl Strawberry. He's got 254 currently. Where does Pete Alonso rank for you? 1, as an all-time Met, and 2, as a position player, because I know there's a lot of really good starting pitchers that come from this organization. So as an all-time Met and as well as a position player for the Mets.
I mean, he's up there, right? He's got to be right up there. Like, you don't set the home run record by accident. I think Alonso has been a consummate Met. Everything about him is a Met. And, you know, as we said earlier in the show, like, I can't envision him putting on another jersey next year. Doesn't mean he's going to necessarily be a Met for his entire baseball career. Like, that could go another way. But right now, Pete Alonso needs to stay here. And, you know, as far as my lifetime, because obviously I wasn't alive for 86. Like, I'm very aware of what Keith brought to the table and Darryl brought to the table and Gary Carter and that whole team that won the World Series. But I wasn't born until 88. So for my money, it's Piazza, it's Wright.
Yep.
It's Alonso. Those are the guys. And, you know, the Mets have had awesome players. Like, I was a huge Carlos Beltran guy, and you know, Jose Reyes, obviously huge for this organization. But Pete is, for me, for my money, right up there with anyone that has ever put on a Mets uniform as an offensive player.
Yeah, G Money Stacks agrees. He thinks we really turned around. Can't imagine him in another jersey. I can't either. I hope that they get something figured out and that he returns, and eventually his number will be up there. I mean, we saw the love for David Wright this season when they did his number retirement. Really the only star Met, because obviously Ed Kranepool was a Met his whole career, but did not have the type of career that David Wright had. We didn't get to see Seaver his whole career here, and Strawberry. Piazza was traded here. So David Wright really is the only guy that from beginning to end was a Met his whole career. And it would be nice to get another one of those guys, especially with a guy like Pete Alonso, who I feel like still has a lot more in the tank when it comes to power. He really turned it around this season. He's had a big season from what happened last year with the struggles that he had, and has really turned it around.
Big time. And, you know, Pete has plenty of time to hit. The key is going to be, like, how long is he a first baseman? Like, that he's fine now, but at some point that's probably going to turn south and he'll end up a DH of some kind. But I don't think that's imminent. I think people overreact to get after Pete's defense. Elite at scooping the ball, makes good plays down the line. Sure, he needs to work on flipping the ball to pitchers. Sometimes that goes a little haywire, but Pete's fine at first base. The power is there, as you said. I'd love for him to be the next lifelong Met. I don't know if that will happen necessarily, but I can't imagine, at least for the next few years, Pete Alonso playing anywhere else. And if you want another lifelong Met, Brandon Nimmo is probably going to be a lifelong Met, I would imagine. Drafted, developed, signed that long-term contract. So I think that's another guy that's on this team that'll probably end up being a Met for his whole career. But let's extend the Pete Alonso stay. I don't need to get to the whole career part yet. We don't need to put the cart ahead of the horse here, but let's just extend the stay for at least a few more years.
You would say, let's say he doesn't, right? Like he doesn't resign.
Yeah.
I still think that his number gets retired.
Probably, I would imagine so. I mean, it's with all due respect, they've retired jerseys for much less. I think in recent years. So I definitely think at some point in time, number 20 has a really good shot to be up in the rafters next to 5 and all the other numbers that are up there.
Well, Joe, I appreciate you coming on the show today. Duran Rivera, shout out to Joe DeMayo, who along with Connor Rogers does a great job on the Mets pod. Let us know what you got coming up.
Oh, just more Mets pod. So yeah, more Mets pod. Obviously, check out my writing as well. I always post everything I write, and that's always available on sny.tv. We'll be doing a live show at Citi Field in a couple weeks, so at the real end of August. So make sure you come check that out. But check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, blah blah blah, and SNY's YouTube channel. If you want to see this decent looking face and a much better looking man and Connor Rogers talk about the Mets, go on SNY's YouTube and you could watch every single episode we do. If you want to see David Wright's face, he was on last week's episode. If you want to see Gary Cohen's face, he was on 2 episodes ago. So make sure you're checking out the Mets pod, and we'll give you details on that live show where I think we're going to have a pretty cool guest for it. So stay tuned for that. But as always, my friend, appreciate the time, appreciate chatting with you. And yeah, let's go ahead and start rallying off some wins. It was good to win one, but let's get a winning streak going.
Yeah, let's let this be the beginning of a big run for this Mets team. It's always not how you start, it's always how you finish. Mets had a strong finish last year. Let's see them do it again this year. Shout out to you, Joe. Appreciate you, my friend. Also, shout out to 135 people who were in the room for the show. A special shout out to Maureen for the super chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, as well as Duran Rivera with the shout out in the super chat as well. That wraps it up for the Subway to Shea podcast. Make sure you're following on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at AntRivera86. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you prefer to listen, this will be up later tonight for you guys, most likely after the game I think it's in Williamsport, right?
Yeah. I honestly didn't know. I didn't know this was happening. I feel like now that I know it's happening, I remember it being like talked about at some point, but I completely forgot.
Well, they also have, and because you had David Wright on, they have the NYPD versus FDNY,
Yes.
and I'm like, how is this game on at 4 p.m. with the Mets playing like a day game? Are they playing a night game? Like, how's this going to work? And then when they said that they were doing the Little League game, I was like, oh, they're not going to be home. They're going to be in Williamsport or, wherever they're playing the game at. But a shout out to that. One last thing.
Yeah.
You got to talk really quickly. I know this is not going to be for everybody, but how are we feeling about our Dallas Cowboys? Because I am not really into this what's going on with them right now.
If they could just give Micah Parsons his contract, like we know what it's going to be. Just give the guy his dang contract, because otherwise it's been the weirdest, quietest, no issue training camp. Like they trade for George Pickens and I'm waiting for him to like fight somebody or go crazy. He's been calm. It's been a calm preseason, and obviously, like, I don't care about preseason results. They lost the first 2. If they lose the third, I don't really care either.
I don't remember the last time they've won a preseason game, honestly.
Yeah, they don't win preseason games, so I don't care. I think the offense is going to actually be really good. I feel really good about Lamb and Pickens, and I think Ferguson's going to bounce back, and they'll figure out running back. But, man, this Micah Parsons thing is driving me crazy, because in the NFL, unlike Major League Baseball, where you don't really know what these guys are going to get, like Juan Soto before the offseason, we're like, this guy might get $600 million. That's absolutely insane. And he gets 765. Football, it's just like whatever the last guy got, you just get a little bit more. So TJ Watt signed 3 years, 41 a year or whatever. Micah's a little younger. He'll eventually sign, I think. Ultimately, it's probably going to work out, but he's going to end up signing 4 years and like $42 million a year. So get your head out of your butts. Just get it done. I think the Cowboys are going to be a playoff contender, like they usually are, as long as Dak is healthy. But I certainly don't have faith that we're about to go to the NFC Championship for the first time in 30 years. So, yeah, probably another Cowboys year. But I'm excited, and I'm actually going to Dallas for the first time since since the Zeke bucket game, when he jumped into the salvation bucket. That was the last time I went to Dallas. So I'm going with one of my friends who's a big Packers fan. We went to the Dez catch game in Green Bay. We drove to Green Bay for the Des Catch playoff game, and we're going to Cowboys Packers at the end of September. So really excited about football, and hopefully the Cowboys give me something to root for, because the Mets are only going to last me until like late October, I think. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah, Jerry Jones likes to make everything interesting. He just can't give us like one plain,
No, just
relaxing.
Make it easy.
Make it easy for us. He just can't do that. Make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube as well. You guys are great in the chat. That's where it's at, and that's where it's you got to be on for this show. But for Joe, for myself, this has been Subway to Shea, and always remember, let's go Mets.